Have you ever felt like you were on the verge of something amazing, only to have it all come crashing down? You give your best, you pour your heart into something, and then nothing, a rejection, a door slams in your face. The dream feels further away than ever, but here's the truth we don't talk about enough. Rejection isn't failure, it's redirection. What if I told you that every no you've heard, every opportunity that slipped through your fingers, wasn't the end of your story, but the beginning of something greater? What if rejection is actually the universe's way of steering you towards something better, something that aligns more deeply with who you're meant to be? Tonight, I want to share a powerful shift that could change how you view setbacks forever. I'll show you how rejection can be the most important thing to ever happen to you, and how it's not just about what's taken away, but what's waiting for you on the other side. Because sometimes it's only when things fall apart that we finally make space for everything that was always meant to come together. We feel pain after rejection not because we're weak, but because we cared. We invested our time, our energy, our hope, and when something you care about doesn't go your way, it's natural to hurt. But the hurt isn't proof that you're not good enough. It's proof that you showed up. And here's the thing, your worth doesn't decrease just because someone else couldn't see it. The world is full of people, companies, and circumstances that may not recognize your value in the moment. That doesn't mean you're not valuable. It just means they weren't your people, your opportunity, your moment. Sometimes the rejection we fear is actually doing us a favor. It's removing what wasn't aligned. It's clearing space for something better. Something more true to who we are and what we're becoming. It may not feel like it at the time, but that no might be the very thing that frees you to find your yes. Because here's what happens when something doesn't work out. We ask better questions. We stop and reassess. We gain clarity, not just about what we want, but about what we truly need. We start moving with intention rather than assumption. Rejection isn't a roadblock, it's a recalibration. It's not setting you back, it's setting you up. Every no is a sharpening tool, making you more resilient, more aware, more capable. And when the right opportunity shows up, you'll be more prepared than you ever would have been without that redirection. And in the end, growth doesn't come from avoiding rejection. It comes from facing it, learning from it, and moving through it. The people who thrive aren't the ones who never hear no. They're the ones who let no guide them toward their most powerful yes. So the next time you face rejection, don't see it as a stop sign. See it as a compass. It may just be pointing you in a direction far greater than you imagined. Let me take you back to a moment we've all lived through, one of those deeply personal rejections that stays with you for years. Maybe it was that person you really liked who said they didn't feel the same. Or maybe it was a job you had poured your heart into preparing for, only to get that cold, automated email. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. You sit there in silence, reading those words again and again, and the thought creeps in, what's wrong with me? But here's the twist, it's not about your worth. What you're feeling in that moment isn't a confirmation of inadequacy. It's grief, not over your value, but over your investment. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah had been interviewing for her dream job for months, late nights researching the company, perfecting her answers, rehearsing her pitch in the mirror until it no longer felt like a performance. She even started visualizing herself working there, what desk she'd sit at, the team meetings, the projects she'd crush. She made it to the final round. The feedback had been glowing. You're a strong fit, they told her. She started to believe it. She started to see herself in that role, not as a possibility, but as a future. And then came the rejection. No explanation, just a polite no. What followed wasn't just disappointment, it was disorientation, because in her mind, she had already arrived at the destination. She had emotionally unpacked her bags. And now she had to leave a place she'd never even entered. That's what rejection really is. It's emotional eviction. It kicks you out of a version of reality you'd started to believe was yours. But notice this, Sarah didn't cry because she wasn't good enough. She cried because she had invested her time, her energy, her hope. Her pain was a measure of her commitment, not her inadequacy. When we face rejection, we often make the mistake of tying our identity to the outcome. We think if they don't want me, there must be something wrong with me. But that's not true. If you order a coffee and don't like it, it doesn't mean the barista is a failure. It just means the coffee wasn't your taste. It's a mismatch, not a measure of value. The emotional trap comes from confusing value with validation. Rejection feels like a personal verdict when really, it's often just a logistical mismatch, wrong timing. Wrong place, wrong person, wrong fit. So why does it still hurt so much? Because investment magnifies the loss. The more you cared, the more you built in your mind and heart, the greater the grief when it crumbles. But here's the reframe. If rejection feels heavy, it means you cared deeply. You were all in, and that's not weakness, that's courage. That means you had the guts to hope, to try, to want something more. And that's power. The people who never feel this pain are the ones who never put their hearts on the line. They stay safe, stay small, stay untouched, but they also stay stuck. Rejection is a tax you pay for playing big. It's not a penalty for who you are. It's the cost of daring to want something meaningful. So the next time you feel the sting of rejection, don't ask, "What's wrong with me?" Ask, "What did I build in my heart that was so beautiful, its loss made me feel this much?" Because that's where your strength lies, in the depth of your investment, not in the approval of others. So the next time you feel the sting of rejection, don't ask, "What's wrong with me?" Ask, "What did I build in my heart that was so beautiful, its loss made me feel this much?" Because that's where your strength lives, in the depth of your investment, not in the approval of others. But now comes the dangerous part. What happens after the rejection? The part we don't talk about enough. Because once the dust settles, once you've cried your tears or vented to your closest friend, something sneaky creeps in, that small voice, the one that whispers, "Maybe I'm just not enough." It doesn't come in like a storm. It comes quietly, subtly. It's in the pause before you send the next application. It's in the way you hold back a little more the next time you meet someone new. It's in the doubt you carry even after the world's moved on. Let me tell you about Jason. Jason had built a startup from scratch. He poured everything into it, worked 14-hour days, sacrificed weekends, gave up relationships. He finally got a chance to pitch to a major investor, a make-or-break moment. The pitch went smoothly, but the next day, the investor passed. No real feedback, just not the right fit. Jason didn't just take it as a rejection of his idea. He took it as a rejection of himself. His confidence took a hit. He stopped showing up the same way in future meetings, and eventually the startup folded, not because it wasn't good, but because he stopped believing it was worth fighting for. Here's the truth we all have to face. Just because someone can't see your value doesn't mean it isn't there. Think about that. Really let it sink in. We live in a world obsessed with external validation, likes, promotions, compliments, attention. But real value often goes unseen. Diamonds don't lose their worth because someone walks past them unaware, and your worth doesn't drop because someone overlooked you, underestimated you, or chose someone else. What they see, or don't see, is often a reflection of their lens, not your light. Sometimes people aren't ready for what you bring. Sometimes they're looking for something else entirely. Sometimes they're not capable of receiving the depth of what you offer. That's not your fault. That's not your responsibility. And yet, we internalize their no, as if it's the whole story. But one person's rejection isn't a final verdict. It's just a single opinion. And opinions are often built on incomplete information, personal bias, fear, or plain old bad timing. So what's the shift? You stop chasing recognition and start standing in your truth. You stop asking, why didn't they want me? And start asking, what kind of person, opportunity, or space actually sees me? Because the real danger of rejection isn't the rejection itself. It's that it makes you question your own eyes. It makes you forget what you bring to the table. You have to guard yourself. Perception like your life depends on it, because in a way it does. Your belief in yourself is the root of every risk you take, every conversation you start, every dream you dare to build. So here's the bottom line. Their inability to recognize your value doesn't mean you have none. It just means they want the right mirror. Keep showing up, keep reflecting your own light, until it lands in a space that finally says, there you are, we've been waiting for you. Their inability to recognize your value doesn't mean you have none. It just means they want the right mirror. Keep showing up, keep reflecting your own light, until it lands in a space that finally says, there you are, we've been waiting for you. But here's what you might not see in the moment, that in being unseen, unchosen, or let go, something else begins, space, the space that opens up when the wrong thing eggs. It's your life is uncomfortable, but it's also powerful. That job you didn't get, that person who didn't stay, that opportunity that passed you by, as painful as it felt, it also freed you, because rejection, more than anything else, is a form of subtraction, and all subtraction, painful as it may be, creates space, and space is where alignment happens. But at first, it doesn't feel like space. It feels like loss. It feels like you're standing in a room where something used to be, and now there's just air, emptiness, silence, that ache. That's the moment before something better begins. Let me tell you about Layla. Layla was in a long-term relationship. From the outside, it looked solid. Good photos, shared goals, mutual respect. But deep down, she knew something was missing. There was no spark anymore, no stretch, no sense of forward motion. Still, she stayed, until one day he ended it, just like that, said he needed something different. Layla was devastated, not because she thought it was perfect, but because she hadn't been the one to let go. It felt like a personal failure, like she hadn't been enough to keep it together. But what happened next was interesting. That breakup created space in her life she hadn't realized she needed. She had evenings free. A cleared calendar, a clear mirror, and in that space things began to surface. Passions she'd put on hold, friendships she'd neglected. Even a business idea she'd buried years ago came back to life. Within 6 months, Layla was building something entirely her own, and attracting people who resonated with the real version of her, not the edited one she'd maintained to keep the relationship going. See, alignment can't happen when you're filled up with things that don't fit. You can't align with something better while clinging to something good enough. You can't make room for the right person, job, partner, or dream if your life is already overcrowded with mismatches. That's why rejection, as awful as it feels in the moment, is sometimes the universe's most direct way of clearing the board. It takes away what you wouldn't. It ends what you were trying to maintain out of fear. It shuts the door you kept peeking through just in case, because sometimes you're not brave enough to choose what's right, so rejection chooses for you, and while it might feel like you've been emptied out, you've actually been opened up for something bigger, something clearer, something more in sync with the life you were meant to live. But here's the catch, you won't see it immediately. Alignment doesn't walk through the door the second rejection walks out. There's a gap, and in that gap, you have to trust. You have to believe that what's leaving your life is making room for something better, not by accident, but by design. Rejection isn't just a no, it's a nudge, a divine redirection toward the people, paths, and possibilities that match your truth, not your fear. So when it feels like everything's falling apart, remember, it might just be falling into place. But that's hard to accept when you don't know where it's all leading. When the door closes, the lights go out, and you're left standing in the hallway, silent, uncertain, asking the question we all ask in the aftermath. Now what? It's the in-between that tests us most. Not the rejection itself, not the pain right after, but that strange stretch of time where you no longer belong to what was, and you're not yet sure of what's coming. Here's where most people panic. They rush to fill the space. They grab for the next available option, the next job, the next relationship, the next distraction, anything that quiets the discomfort of not knowing. But let me offer you a different perspective. What if not knowing is the beginning of knowing? What if the very thing that feels like disorientation is actually direction? If only you'd stop trying to skip past it. Let me tell you about Aaron. Aaron had spent 7 years in a career he didn't love, but it paid well and people respected him. Deep down, though, he always felt misaligned, like he was acting out a version of success someone else had written for him. Then, one day, he got laid off. No warning, no ceremony, just a Friday meeting, a folder, and a thank you for your service. His first instinct was panic. Apply everywhere, stay moving, don't let the identity crumble, but something in him paused. He didn't know what was next, and for once, he let himself sit in that space. It was in that pause that clarity began to creep in. Not all at once, not in a lightning bolt moment, but through small reflections. He remembered how alive he felt when he was mentoring new employees. He remembered a notebook full of business ideas he had shelved. He realized the dread he used to feel every Sunday evening wasn't normal, and maybe it wasn't necessary either. The closed door had given him something his routine never had, a clean view of himself. Because here's the truth we often miss: rejection disrupts the autopilot. When you lose what you thought was your path, you're forced to ask deeper questions. What do I actually want? What energizes me? Who am I when no one's watching? Closed doors are not just endings, they're data. They are directional signs disguised as disappointment. They tell you what isn't yours, what no longer fits, what's misaligned. They strip away the noise so you can finally hear your intuition, but only if you're brave enough to stay in the hallway. Because clarity isn't loud, it's quiet, and if you rush too quickly to the next destination, you'll miss the chance to chart a better direction. The danger isn't in being lost. The danger is in pretending you're not. Because when you chase a destination blindly, you may arrive at a place that looks good on paper, but feels hollow inside. Direction requires awareness. It requires reflection. It requires asking, what is this moment trying to tell me? Not, how fast can I escape it? So here's your challenge. Next time a door slams shut, don't sprint toward the next one. Sit, breathe, pay attention, because the space you're in, it's not the end of the path. It's the place where your real map starts to unfold. So here's your challenge. The next time a door slams shut, don't sprint toward the next one. Sit, breathe, pay attention, because the space you're in, it's not the end of the path. It's the place where your real map starts to unfold. But here's what no one tells you about that moment, that space, that waiting room between where you were and where you're going. It doesn't feel like the start of something. It feels like you've been dropped. Like you've taken a step back while everyone else is moving forward. People post promotions, engagements, launches, milestones, and there you are questioning if the setback you're in is permanent. You start to think maybe you're behind. Maybe you missed your shot. Maybe rejection really was the end. But here's the shift you need to make. You're not being set back. You're being set up. Let me introduce you to Ben. Ben was a talented musician, gigging part-time while working a corporate job. His dream was to score music for film, but every attempt to break into the industry hit a wall. Emails ignored, doors shut, and the little successes, they fizzled. Eventually, he got laid off from his day job. No steady income, no backup plan. Everyone told him to pivot, get something stable, play it safe. Instead, he doubled down. He spent those setback months studying sound production, networking online, and learning how to pitch to indie filmmakers. He didn't know if it would pay off, but he stayed with it, and then it happened. A short film director discovered his work on social media. One gig turned into 3. One connection opened 5 doors. Within 2 years, Ben had scored his first feature film. But here's what he said that stuck with me. If I hadn't gotten laid off, I never would have taken myself seriously enough to commit to this. The so-called setback had removed his safety net, and that's exactly what made him leap. You see, redirection doesn't just give you space. It gives you fuel, the loss, the frustration, the I can't believe this didn't work out. All of it becomes the very thing that refines you, not because pain is noble, but because it sharpens your focus. It peels away the fluff, the noise, the distractions, and what's left, a version of you that's dialed in, hungry, honest, ready. We don't grow most when things are going well. We grow when we have no choice but to rebuild. When the structure collapses and we're forced to look at the foundation and decide what's still worth keeping, setbacks expose what you've been building unconsciously. They show you where your energy has been going and whether it's been going to something that truly matters. And here's the beauty of being set up. It often doesn't look like progress in the beginning. It looks like silence. It looks like nothing. But deep underground, the root system is forming. The foundation is strengthening. The danger is in mistaking that silence for failure. Don't do that. Don't walk away when your soil is just starting to deepen. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're being prepared. Prepared for the thing that actually fits. Prepared to meet the opportunity that matches your growth, not your fear. Prepared to hold what you once would have fumbled. So if it feels like you're starting over, remember, you're not. You're starting deeper. And that's the beginning of something unshakable. So if it feels like you're starting over, remember, you're not. You're starting deeper. And that's the beginning of something unshakable. But now you're standing at a crossroads. You've been rejected. You've been rerouted. You've sat in the quiet, wrestled with the uncertainty. Maybe even started to feel the ground beneath you shift again. And then comes the moment, the one that decides everything. Not the moment you get the next big opportunity, not the one where someone finally says yes, but the moment where you have to choose, do I keep showing up, or do I start protecting myself from this ever happening again? Because here's the truth, most people never say out loud rejection makes you want to shrink. It makes you want to armor up, to lower the stakes, to stop caring so deeply, because if you don't go all in, maybe it won't hurt so much next time. If you don't try so hard, maybe you won't feel so gutted if it doesn't work out. That's what avoidance does. It seduces you with the illusion of safety. But here's the cost of avoidance. It keeps you stuck. Not because you're not good enough, but because you've stopped evolving. Let me tell you about Naomi. Naomi was a brilliant writer, raw, honest, powerful voice. But after receiving multiple rejections from publishers early in her career, she made a quiet decision. Not to quit writing entirely, but to write smaller. She kept her words in journals, private blogs. Half-finished manuscripts. Her gift was alive, but hidden, because rejection had convinced her it was safer to keep it to herself than to risk being dismissed again. It wasn't until years later, when she wrote a piece for a friend's newsletter, casually, almost without thinking, that things changed. That piece went viral, and suddenly agents were reaching out, doors were opening, not because she'd finally become worthy. She'd always been worthy, but because she finally stopped avoiding and started adapting. She submitted again, but this time she did it with clearer boundaries, with more trust in her own voice, with a sharper sense of who she was writing for. That's the key. It's not about becoming bulletproof, it's about becoming flexible. Progress doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from learning how to move through it without losing yourself. It's what you do after the no that defines your trajectory. Do you turn inward and wither, or do you turn inward and refine? because people who thrive after rejection aren't magical. They just decided not to let a moment of loss define their future. They listened, they learned, they adjusted. They became more resilient, not by avoiding risk, but by learning how to stay standing when it didn't work out. Adaptation is your real superpower. It's the ability to shift your approach without shrinking your identity, to remain soft without being fragile, to grow without growing bitter, and that's how progress is made, not by being perfect or always getting the yes, but by staying in motion, by staying open. So if you're still carrying the weight of a rejection, if part of you is wondering if you've lost your edge or missed your moment, let me remind you of something simple but powerful. You don't need to be invincible. You just need to be willing to get back up, willing to evolve, willing to move forward, even when it hurts, because in the end, the people who win aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who fall, adapt, and rise again, with more clarity, more strength, and more fire than ever before. Would you like me to help you transition this series of keynotes into a full-length speech or presentation outline? Rejection isn't failure, it's redirection. Every no you've ever received wasn't proof you weren't good enough. It was proof you were brave enough to try, to invest, to care. And while it's easy to confuse rejection with worthlessness, the truth is, your value doesn't decrease just because someone else couldn't see it. Sometimes the closed door is doing you a favor. It's clearing the path for something that actually fits. And in that space, that uncomfortable silence, you gain the clarity to ask better questions, chart better directions, and make more aligned choices. You are not being set back, you are being set up for something stronger, deeper, and far more aligned with who you're becoming. The people who thrive aren't the ones who never fall. They are the ones who adapt, who stay open, who choose to learn instead of shut down. So if you're standing in the ruins of something you hoped would work out, don't rush to rebuild with scraps. Stand in that space, listen, and move forward. Not bitter, but better. Because rejection isn't where your story ends. It's where the real story finally begins.